Welcome to One for the Road. I'm Devvy Kid and your commentator. One for the Road was developed and created to help the busy commuter and Americans who don't have access to the internet find out what Congress and the media won't tell you. This next segment is one of my columns. It's titled FDR and the Pearl Harbor Attack. And I'm quoting here from the Smithsonian Treasury, the President's 1991, quote, "When Franklin Roosevelt died during the closing days of World War II, it fell to Truman to end the war and formulate policies for a new world order," unquote. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is much loved and revered by Democrats, but not everyone felt that way during his administration. In 1935, Arthur Henning of the Chicago Tribune said, quote, "The New Deal will bring the Communist Party within striking distance of overthrow of the American form of government," unquote. In the same year, Mark Sullivan of the Buffalo Evening News was even more alarmed when he said, quote, "The New Deal is to America what the early phase of Nazism was to Germany," unquote. One shouldn't believe everything they read in a book, but in the case of Day of Deceit, The Truth About FDR and Pearl Harbor by Robert B. Stinnett, there can be no denying the awful truth that FDR not only knew the Japanese were going to attack, but official documents prove FDR wanted them to strike America first. Stinnett spent 16 years doing his research and fighting in the courts to obtain a plethora of shocking documents under the Freedom of Information Act. Their authenticity cannot be denied. This link to a PDF file provides a few of the official documents. For example, this official document, directs the Hawaiian U.S. Army Commander, Lieutenant General Walter Short, to follow an official U.S. government desire. The United States desires that Japan commit the first overt act," unquote. Pearl Harbor was no surprise. Day of infamy indeed. While Stinnett should be commended for his commitment to expose the truth and help clear the names of those military officers wrongly blamed, I was shocked by his comment on page 259, quote, "As heinous as it seems to families and veterans of World War II, of which the author is one, the Pearl Harbor attack was, from the White House perspective, something that had to be endured in order to stop a greater evil, the Nazi invaders in Europe who had begun the Holocaust and were poised to invade England," unquote. There were 2,403 Americans who died at Pearl Harbor. According to Stinnett, who backs up FDR, those 2,403 Americans were acceptable casualties in order to take America into war. Stinnett goes on to say on the same page, quote, "Had the facts uncovered in this book been known immediately after the war ended, and had Roosevelt explained his war strategies and tactics to the families who lost their sons at Pearl Harbor, how different American history might be viewed today," unquote. I feel confident in saying that the families of those 2,403 Americans slaughtered at Pearl Harbor with the full knowledge of a sitting president of the United States would not have been very understanding. I was further shocked by Stinnett's next comment on the same page. Quote, "The truth that has been told here does not diminish FDR's magnificent contributions to the American people. His legacy should not be tarnished by the truth. As with all American presidents, Roosevelt must be viewed in the total context of his administration, not just Pearl Harbor," unquote. Quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I would be ashamed to say such a thing. Allowing Japan to commit the first overt act, military aggression against America on our own soil, can hardly be called anything but murder. The American people deserved to be told the truth by FDR and what he was planning. Instead, those whose loved ones in uniform at Pearl Harbor that were to be sacrificed were never given any warning. They were simply slaughtered on a beautiful Sunday morning. But it wasn't FDR or his cabinet who would be on the battlefield. It was the sons, husbands, fathers, and brothers out in America who would spill their blood for a lie. Shouldn't they have been told the truth? There is no question that Adolf Hitler had to be stopped. He was a monster. While people of the Jewish faith were the primary target of Hitler, more than 3 million Poles and other Gentiles also perished during the Holocaust, including 1 million Catholics, all verified by meticulous records kept by the Germans. Had Hitler not gotten the help he needed from certain heads of state and influential families behind the scenes, and had the rest of Europe not sat around on their hands while the Third Reich was building power, Hitler could have been stopped. While I'm certain many will disagree, I don't believe the White House and our State Department did everything in their power diplomatically to garner the immense forces in Europe to stand against Hitler without war, because it wasn't in the best interests of the international banking cartel who have controlled Washington, D.C. since 1913. We should never forget any man, woman, or child, regardless of religion or ethnic origin, who died under the Third Reich. We should also never forget what FDR did and then covered up, along with 11 U.S. presidents since his administration. That's the end of my column, but I am going to take a moment here to read from some of the documents that Stinnett obtained under the Freedom of Information Act. These documents were forced by a federal judge. As I said, there cannot be any doubt as to their authenticity. This first document is Appendix C on page 281 of Stinnett's book. A series of war warnings issued by the government. This was originally marked top secret, of course, was forced release by the judge from the Navy Department. Prediction of a Japanese, quote, surprise aggressive movement in any direction, unquote, came from Rear Admiral Royal Ingersoll, Assistant Chief of Naval Operations, on November 24, 1941. Upon receiving this message on the super-secret U.S. Navy CETYH circuit, Admiral Husband E. Kimmel pulled the Pacific Fleet out of a North Pacific reconnaissance mission. That is a description of the document. And, of course, these are all authenticated. The next document on page 282 is Stinnett's book, Headquarters, Hawaiian Department, Fort Shafter. This source comes from General Short's paper, The Hoover Institution Archives, Stanford University, Stanford, California, but it is an authentic document. Though it is signed Marshall, this November 27, 1941 war warning message was originated by Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson, acting on orders of President Roosevelt. It directs the Hawaiian U.S. Army Commander, Lieutenant General Walter Short, to follow an official U.S. government desire. Quote, from this government document, the United States desires that Japan commit the first overt act, unquote. The next document on page 283, the description, of course, it was all marked top secret. The U.S. Navy's war warning message of November 27, 1941, authored by Rear Admiral Royal Ingersoll, omitted the crucial orders of President Roosevelt that called for U.S. military forces to let Japan commit the first overt act. This omission was corrected the next day, which is the next document, page 284, Appendix C. On Friday, November 28, 1941, Admiral Harold Stark, the Chief of Naval Operations, restored the previous day's omission by twice repeating that the United States desired Japan to commit the first overt act. The next document, page 286, again from the Headquarters Hawaiian Department. A second warning to prepare for subversive activities and sabotage in Hawaii was issued to Lieutenant General Walter Short by the U.S. Army Adjutant General Emory Adams on Friday, November 28, 1941. Adams warned Short not to precipitate publicity or alarm. In other words, just allow our military at Pearl Harbor to be slaughtered. It's very difficult to do this kind of research, ladies and gentlemen. I've been doing it for 16 years. It doesn't make it any easier.